Welcome back. Now, after 750 days of lockdown, the national state of disaster is finally over. However, the business sector has serious concerns. It says that proposed amendments to National Health Act regulations will see far-reaching restrictions which will hinder certain businesses. So I'm now joined by Rob Hutchinson, DearSA MD, to discuss these concerns. Rob, always a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for your time this morning. I know the last time we had a conversation, you were taking government to court over, the national state of disaster, demanding that actually it be scrapped. Are you satisfied that now it is, or are there still concerns even with the scrapping of the national state of disaster?
Well, obviously, we are happy that the national state of disaster has been lifted, but our major concern is now around the regulations. Because what is happening now is that the regulations seem to be shifted in their entirety to be permanent underneath the Health Act. So that is of major concern to us, and it should be of concern to all South Africans. And it's not just the regulations that were currently in place, it's all the regulations that have ever been drafted, including the ones that many civil society organizations fought to actually have withdrawn. They're all now being placed as permanent underneath the Health Act. So we will be continuing with court action in that regard on several fronts here.
No, because, someone might say it seems that because they moved now to the National Health Act, they're continuing these regulations, indefinitely. It's just now being placed under almost a different body.
That's exactly right. Well, the Health Act is a permanent piece of legislation, whereas the Disaster Management Act was temporary. That's why they had to extend it by 30 days on the 15th of every month for the past 2 years. But moving the same regulations underneath a permanent piece of legislation is a dangerous situation. As the Minister is granted absolute power, it doesn't require any parliamentary oversight or anything else. It's actually up to the sole discretion of the Minister or the Ministry to enforce those if they predict a pandemic or if they predict anything else that is similar to a pandemic.
Yeah. Do you think government still believes that we are still in a state of disaster, hence this decision? Because, the President did mention that we're still in a pandemic, even though the wearing of masks may be scrapped outside. It will be, of course, be necessary to wear your mask when you are indoors. So there's still, some regulations, as we're talking now, that still need to be adhered to. But it almost feels as though government may still almost say, without even saying it and wording it, that we are still in a disaster.
Well, yes, the problem there is that, if I could take you back a little while, we filed papers against the Minister, as you mentioned in the beginning there, and we gave her until the 25th of March to respond to those court papers. She didn't respond, so we granted another 10 days, which took us to exactly the 5th. And lo and behold, she didn't respond again, but the President announced that the state of disaster had ended on the 5th, the exact day that we had demanded it to do so. So they had this gap. They had a gap between when the state of disaster would be renewed, as it does on the 15th, and the 5th of a 10-day gap. And that's why these interim regulations are currently in place. However, they cannot exist without any piece of legislation. So there's also a question around those. But government definitely wants to cling onto the power that was held under the Disaster Management Act through the regulations. That's why they've now shifted them to the Health Act. And I must stress here that the problem here is that they are permanent, and they will be permanently in place underneath the Health Act.
And what concerns do these pose, as opposed even for business? What do we foresee here in terms of the limitations that come with these now permanent regulations to business, to livelihood, to some sense of normalcy in the country?
Absolutely everything that we saw at the beginning of the lockdown. Do you remember 21 days to flatten the curve? Well, we could be in that situation right again next week. Should infections suddenly start to spike, should death rates start to climb, or should a new virus actually appear, then we could be in exactly the same position as we were 750 days ago.
Yeah. All right, well, we leave it there, Rob, and I appreciate you speaking to us this morning. Rob Hutchinson DearSA Campaign MD, of course, still continuing with their court action against government, saying they're not satisfied with the regulations, of course, being moved from the National State of Disaster to the National Health Act, because that, of course, means that the regulations would be more permanent and would continue indefinitely. All right.